Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday. This week, we have with us Chuck Durfee. Hey, Chuck. Welcome back.
Hi, Vasco. Hi, listeners. How are you?
Absolutely all great, and looking forward to hear your perspective from an engineering lead perspective on what is the best retro that you think all Scrum Masters should be running out there?
Now that's an interesting question. The one that came to mind when you asked me this question earlier was I had a team very recently who we had just finished a project. We were running on Kanban, so the trigger for retrospectives wasn't a time box, but it was a project completion. So we'd finished this feature and we were trying to look back on it. And I asked the team, spend some time we were using a Google Doc so we could all see what each other was doing, but design a movie poster that would capture the story of bringing this feature to life. And as typically happens with retrospectives, sometimes the format was a little foreign to them and they kind of stuttered a little bit, but then they started to congeal and they really started having a lot of fun. They went on to, like Google or Bing, and they would capture some images and they would put them there and they would start captioning them, and then they started figuring out what the kind of plot was. The name of this movie was It Came From Management. And as you're laughing, Vasco, you can see it was a B-reel horror film, and there was a swamp creature in the whole nine yards. And of course, I'm the manager of this team, so I'm trying not to take this personally. But as they started explaining the story, I'm like, yeah, you're right. We did interrupt the team there because we had this other emergency that we had to handle. Yeah, you're right. I did do that. I didn't make that part clear. It was really illuminating for me. And I explained to them how valuable their feedback was in that case, that I was a little blind to some of the impact I was having on the team. And my boss's bosses were too, because they were actually directly involved in what was happening with the team as well. So not only was that a fun retrospective format, but asking them to create that story kind of got out of some of the more standard formats where you ask questions in a different way. This one, their creative juices flowed and they were able to be more honest with me. And I think ultimately when you're doing retrospectives, trying to get the team to be honest is one of the most challenging pieces of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And opening up about things that they might have not completely realized as they were happening, right? Because hindsight, as they say, is 2020. So when you're here after the project is over, you have a different perspective on what has actually happened, and you can reason about it with a lot more information. And I also find that this metaphor style storytelling retros really help to bring all of those kind of clues together into something a little bit more concrete.
Yeah, I've seen things like Boat and Anchor, for example, which was another one of those where you're kind of telling a story, but this one seemed to really resonate. So I wanted to share it.
Absolutely. Design a movie poster. We'll put the link to an example, if I can find one online, on the show notes. But if not, you can go back and listen to the explanation. Chuck, now we turn our attention to what makes a successful development lead or development manager. So share with us, in your mind, what does success mean for you as a leader of development or engineering organizations?
Yeah, so this is probably not one that you hear on the podcast so often, right? As a Scrum Master, the things that you're measured on are definitely different than an engineering manager, but there's some overlap in these two roles as well. A development manager is typically measured on results and retention. Those are the two things that will either mean promotion or trouble for an engineering manager. Results is fairly straightforward, right? as with many leadership roles, if you are able to deliver features in a timely manner and on budget, as I mentioned in my bio, then you're doing well. If you're not able to do that, then there are critical questions that are asked of you. And as an engineering manager, you're somewhat responsible for building the, if you want to think about it, build the mechanism that's delivering the software. You're responsible for shaping the team into a highly performing entity. The other piece is retention. It is possible as an engineering manager, and I'm sure we've all had engineering managers or managers in general who have been very results driven and not thought about the people side of the equation and have driven people to burnout through, I wanted to say draconian, maybe that's a little strong, but through tough adherence to schedules and just do whatever it takes to accomplish a goal. There needs to be a balance there. Otherwise, you won't have that retention piece. One of the most expensive parts of software is labor. And if you cause people to leave, you not only have diminished capacity, but then you have to spend tens, if not hundreds of hours finding the right person to replace that person, spend a lot of energy training them and so forth. And all of that is a cost. That is a sunk cost for the company. You can't get that back if it doesn't work out. So retention is really important for engineering managers. So those are the two pillars that I tend to evaluate managers on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking that one of the questions that we ask ourselves as Scrum Masters, of course, is how we can serve the people we work with,
Yes.
not just the team, but also stakeholders. And of course, development managers are stakeholders. So from your perspective, how could a Scrum Master in your team or Scrum Masters in your teams help you with those goals of what you call the results, so on time and on budget delivery and retention?
One place where it's always a fruitful area of discussion and sometimes conflict is in the Scrum Master role, because the Scrum Master is responsible in some ways for the efficiency of the team, right? If you think of process as the mechanism by which you're getting to the result, then the more efficient you make the process, the faster you'll deliver. Well, as we Scrum Masters know, sometimes you need to slow down to go fast, and that can be a point of friction between Scrum Masters and development managers. So you were asking for, from the Scrum Master perspective, I would keep in mind for your dev manager that slowdown means for them that they're not performing as well as they were before, albeit hopefully temporary. So when you're wanting to make your change initiative and adjust your process, you think not only about the long-term gain, but the short-term loss that you're going to have, and help your dev manager position that so that your dev manager is not going to end up trying to oppose you through this slowdown. So as with anything, it's a negotiation process. But if you're aware of knowing that any sort of slowdown is going to cause some heartburn for your manager, figuring out how to overcome those objections early will help your change initiative be accepted faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to have that conversation, and also, as you said earlier in the week, staying curious during that conversation,
yes,
might help with that. And especially, I was thinking that Scrum Masters are very often so much into the team, and they understand the dynamics and so on, that they might actually have information that is critical for the dev manager to understand. And one of the things that comes to mind is that one point of conflict might be that the Scrum Master sees that if we don't do this change, we will actually get much slower. But the dev manager doesn't necessarily see that, right? So what are some tips you have for us as Scrum Masters to be able to have conversations with you about this topic, and also to uncover what might be these differences in perspective that lead one of us to think that things will get much slower, while the other thinks that actually, no, there's no reason to think that?
Yeah. When I'm thinking about the effectiveness of the team, I'm thinking about the time and the talent of the people on the team. And as you mentioned, the Scrum Master is embedded deeply into the team, so they have some insight that the Dev Manager doesn't. So, resolving impediments is really important because that's a drain on time and talent for the team. Inspiring people to do their best work is how you get the best of the talent that's on the team. And effective facilitation is the way you get the most out of the time of the team. And if you're seeing friction in any one of those areas, using that approach of talking about efficiency of resources can sometimes be really helpful with the Dev Manager. And as you were saying, if we don't do this particular change, it's actually going to continue to slow down, and we're going to be in a worse position than we were if we do this. And then maybe I would start brainstorming and partnering with my Dev Manager and say, well, let's talk about timing. You have exposure to what's coming up for the team more than I do. That's one thing that a Dev Manager has better perspective on. So maybe we can figure out what the timing of this change would be and figure out where and when to implement it.
Yeah, finding the right timing is actually a great point that doesn't often get mentioned. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, Chuck.
Yes, of course.
Part of a successful Scrum Master job is to help the product owner. Tomorrow we explore that critical role in Scrum, the product owner role. Tune in to learn about product owner anti-patterns, what you can do to help the product owner, and a real-life example of what a great product owner is and what made it so. Tomorrow on our Friday Product Owner episode. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.